Hi, welcome to the 10th session. In this session, we are going to conclude this concept of biological basis of morality. If you recall, in the 8th session, I opened this idea of potential for existence of something like a biological basis for morality across the animal kingdom and more specifically higher apes as well as the human beings, Homo sapiens, that is. Now, in the second session, we discussed the idea of biological basis as applicable to the animals. That is session number 9. This concluding session, that is session number 10, we are going to talk about the existence or otherwise of a certain inherent and biological or innate basis that might exist for human infants too. That is the idea which we will explain in detail, and we will discuss that at length subsequently. Now, where does it all begin? Because the mental life of human babies is a very fascinating subject. A lot of ideas have been propounded, and some empirical research also has started of late. Now, prior to this research findings from psychology, people made their own uh, theories and assessments, and they came up with some kind of a broad conclusion, which of course now stands highly scrutinized, that human babies are like they enter into this world like blank sheets of paper. They they don't have any sense of what is right and what is wrong. That was the idea that was originally propounded by somebody like a very eminent philosopher like Rousseau. Some of you who have studied political science would know that his thoughts and his philosophy has have actually led to the French Revolution, or at least that is what generally it is believed. Now, Rousseau came up with a very startling kind of a statement when he said that a baby, as it enters into this world, is a perfect idiot. He said that. Now, that of course is a very striking kind of a statement. Surprisingly, that idea was uh, more or less held by a series of philosophers that followed Rousseau. Let us start with Jean Piaget, that French philosopher, Piaget, then Sigmund Freud, of course, and more recently, even Lawrence Kohlberg, the man who came up with that theory of moral development, about which we will discuss sometime uh, during our sessions. All of them have held on to that view that the babies are human babies are neither moral nor immoral. They are just amoral. So all the ideas of morality actually come from the society in which the babies are brought into. That was a kind of a philosophy that was quite closely held for a long time. I mean, nobody really contested that. But the work that has been done of late, especially by eminent psychologists like Paul Bloom, BLOOM, from Yale University, he had come up with lots of experiments because the behavior of the babies is uh, not very easy to decipher or discern from a visual eye estimate. There have to be scientific experiments conducted to exactly determine what is going on in their minds. In the initial years, because there was not enough research, and not enough research was done basically because people couldn't really uh, identify what kind of a methodology is required or will be useful to accurately assess what is going on in the minds of these babies. Unlike unlike the babies of rats, mice, birds, etc., which have a small life cycle and therefore their gestation period is slightly shorter, so they can be immediately subjected to these tests. But human babies are relatively helpless. They are uh, physically not uh, sufficiently strong to undertake or undergo any kind of tests. It's not possible. So, therefore, how do we determine? That was one question that bothered psychologists, and finally, they all came together to conclude that one way of assessing a baby's behavior is by observing the movement of the eyes, because physically they can't move about. So, therefore, we have to find out where what is interesting the baby by the movement of the eyes. In other words, the looking time, the kind of time that a baby allocates to watch something of interest to him or something of no interest to him, would be a rough but reasonably reliable indicator for assessing what's going on in the baby's mind. In other words, uh, you know, the window to the soul of the baby is through the eye. That was the kind of probably assumption with which they had begun. Now, this research, the kind of research that was done by Paul Bloom and others, has given some surprising results. Number one, I'll just list what are all that they found. I mean, there are so many things that they have discovered. Not all of it is relevant, or is it not all of it is necessary also for you to know for the purposes of our examination. So there are some three or four key things I would like to share with you. The first point is that something from physics actually. We all know that there is something called gravity. Baby doesn't know, it's a physical principle. But baby is always fascinated or surprised by the flying objects. That means if a balloon is flying, the attention time or the looking time of a baby is slightly longer. And not just a balloon, anything that flies as in the air. It attracts the attention of the baby. That is one thing. That means somewhere deep inside, there is something embedded in them that tells them that objects have to be grounded. They may not know the word gravity, they may not even understand what it means. But if they are not grounded, there is something about them which is different from the usual. Now that is a very interesting observation. That anything that flies, anything that defies the normal physical principle as we know, apparently they also seem to be aware of that. That's one. Secondly, they did a very interesting experiment. They recorded a particular baby's cry. They cry, babies do cry. When they cry, they recorded that and they made the babies listen to that particular crying of his or her own voice. Babies didn't respond much to that because they were somewhere aware that this particular cry is mine. That understanding was there. But then the same baby, when he or she was made to listen to the cries of other babies, then this baby also started crying. Again, it led to a very interesting conclusion that babies are aware of other people's pain and they also don't feel very good when someone is undergoing some kind of a pain. That is the root of empathy. Now, if you recall, I had mentioned to you last time that chimpanzees, when one of their mates or one of their friends or one of their band members falls from a tree or something like that, they go around and they soothe, they assuage the feelings of the other chimpanzee by touching them or by hugging them or do whatever. Apparently, human babies also, through these experiments, Paul Bloom had discovered that they also do something similar. Once they come of age, that's minimum physiological age of maybe about a year or so, when they can move about and then touch. When some other baby is crying and this baby is in a position to hand over a toy or something like that or touch him, then the feelings will be uh, somewhat curbed. They do that. Now that also is another example of empathy. So a series of experiments have revealed that babies are willing even to help an adult who is in some kind of a trouble, even when they are not physically capable of helping or supporting that adult, they will still volunteer and go near that particular person who is troubled. For example, I'm not able to lift the weight or something like that of some object. This baby will come close to me and then tries to help me in some way or the other. Now, that also surprised because that means there is also a certain element of cooperation, helping others who are in need, with or without any expectation of return. We don't know that. I mean, if there is something like that, also we have no idea. So, all these examples have somewhere led Paul Bloom to conclude that human babies, as they arrive, within them there is a certain element of programming with respect to or software, if I may use that expression, that will help them or that will make them think in terms of certain aspects of life that can be cooperation, that can be empathy. Now, this is also a certain element of justice. Now, when a baby is seeing someone being punished, or maybe they did enact certain uh, moral one act plays, or they had shown them visual images, they had also shown them some films like comics, etc., just to assess their reaction. They were invariably happy whenever a bad person was punished by a good person. So there is a sense of right and wrong there. And whenever a bad man or a bad person is punished by a good person, they were very happy. And not just that, if there are two bad persons and one bad person is punished by another bad person, again they were happy. Now, that means there is a sense of what is right and what is wrong. And babies also have a certain sense of justice somewhere embedded. And they think that the bad requires to be curbed or punished, good requires to be upheld or supported. Now, this kind of views, all the three examples that I've given, each one of them is leading us to some kind of a conclusion that there is a certain sense of justice, there is a sense of cooperation, and there is a sense of empathy. And all the three are actually moral ideas. Here, one caveat: it is not that they have a very refined sense of morality as an adult would have. An adult will obviously rationalize, because that ability to analyze, ability to reason out is a faculty which comes to a human being as he grows in age. So that rationalization process is obviously not there in the babies. But there is a gut feeling. They are reacting from the gut. They're emotionally intense, but cognitively empty. They may not understand why something is right or something is wrong. They may not understand that. But they do feel. And that feeling is the basis which we understand to be a potential biological basis. Now, you cannot, we cannot dismiss all these feelings as meaningless. We can't do that because they're there. It's for us to see. At the same time, you cannot also conclude that they are like uh, complete moral ideas, because the additional factor that is required for a baby to rationalize that this is one behavior that has to be sustained over a long period of time for a better living or harmonious living among ourselves is probably missing. So they don't have that. Fair enough. With age, they acquire that. Rationalization process they will acquire. But the base is always a given in this particular example. With these examples, one can come to that kind of a conclusion. Now, Paul Bloom concludes that this is necessary but not sufficient. Why so? Because if you didn't have that as a starting point in your life, once you enter into this world with these ideas, instincts, maybe, let us use the expression moral instincts. Now, if you didn't have these moral instincts to begin with, as you grew up in your life, you wouldn't have that ability to refine them further. So the idea becomes uh, plausible that we begin like this, but we refine it with age and culture in which we live in. We are taught certain things, we learn certain things intuitively, we figure it out, and eventually we end up as civilized beings. What do the parents do? They only do this. They civilize the babies. They keep on telling them, keep on, well, I don't want to use the word indoctrinating, but something similar they keep doing all the time. Do this, don't do this. If you recall, I had mentioned this in one of my sessions in the initial stages. I think probably second session or third session, I did mention this. All our life, we are getting instructions from people. To begin with, from people who are very close to us, and subsequently, even from people outside of the immediate influence, we are learning all the time. So we grow accordingly, and then we eventually lead ourselves to some kind of a harmonious citizens of the society in which we are all living in. So the sum and substance of this entire discussion that we had so far is that the baby morality within quotes, that is, baby morality is true, it exists, but it's not complete. It gets completed only with the social setting into which that baby is brought. So that kind of uh, closes this discussion by saying that morality, as you and I see in the world around us, is a product of what you are as you began, and the contribution of the society in which you live in. So it is, finally, it is a combination of both that makes us what we are. In other words, the evolutionary preparation for us as we enter into the world will make us start the life within a certain framework, and that framework will start getting expanded, strengthened, reinforced, modified, etc., according to the requirements of the society in which we are living in. So evolution, that is biology, plus society, which is sociology, these two make us whatever we are. In fact, the Scottish philosopher David Hume, he had somewhere written, even reason is also a slave of passion, he said. That would be a very interesting comment. I think we'll have to discuss that at some other time. We think we are all very reasonable people, but like behind every reason, there is a certain element of passion. That is what David Hume had observed, a Scottish philosopher. In fact, he was very famous for his wonderful statement about waking up Kant, Immanuel Kant. And Kant Immanuel was one of those great philosophers, German philosophers. And Immanuel Kant replied back saying that, "Thank you very much for waking me up." In fact, David Hume is one of those people who is considered as an empiricist, a person who doesn't think much about any of these theories. He would simply say, "Give me the evidence. Get me the evidence. I'll let you know what exactly I think about it." So empiricists are actually taking philosophy and the subject of ethics away from armchair rizzling of ideas. In fact, instead, they're coming up with hardcore evidence. So this work done by Paul Bloom is very different from the line that was already taken by people like Rousseau, Lawrence Kohlberg, Jean Piaget, and Sigmund Freud, and all these people belong to one category. And Paul Bloom's work is of another category. Now, Paul Bloom is, I think, a very interesting kind of work that he's doing now. And I think you should spare some time whenever you get some time to read a little more about the work that is done by Paul Bloom. Okay. Now, this concludes this three-part session of 8, 9, 10, three sessions. So this session, I'm going to close the discussion on biological basis of morality. It's over. And then I just want to wish you all a very happy Diwali. Today is actually Diwali day. So I hope you're enjoying with your family and friends, etc. And don't give a let up for the preparation of the examination. It's a non-negotiable. This is the best time of your life. And if you don't give the time that is required for the preparation, then you will not be able to succeed. So every minute is very precious. I'm very conscious of that. And one more thing, some questions have come to me. Some people have asked me whether I could also start solving the question papers, which is, I think, a very fair suggestion. So what I'm doing after these 10 sessions, now I'm closing the discussions on the theoretical aspects for a while. 2013 or 2014 or whatever is the paper, I'll pick up one question paper and then I'll start solving them so that it'll also become a little more examination friendly kind of set of sessions. Thank you very much for being with me and I wish you all the very best.